Hello and welcome everyone to the Netrix live webinar, 8 Keys to Take Microsoft Teams to the Next Level in 2021. I am Dean Pipes. I am going to be your host and take you through the tour, and Jay Perek will close us up with other interesting information towards the end of this webinar. Now, why do you want to level up with Teams? Well, we want to help you by covering how Microsoft is adding new capabilities across several areas, integrating the features and functionality into a single user interface. They continue to evolve at a pace, again, that's very hard to keep up with. As they add those additional capabilities, they're also adding application interfaces, which allows you to integrate your existing business processes, services, and transactions into it. And of course, there's the Power Platform that sits behind this whole thing and continues to integrate further into it. Did I mention yet that it's also cross-platform and runs on mobile devices, tablets, and PCs, and you have a very similar, if not identical, experience across all of them? It's something that enables productivity. It's something that brings us together. It's something that allows us to do our work, to chat, to collaborate, to do meetings together, calling, voice over IP, however you want to call it. It's unified communications to us. It's a platform that contains bots and connectors and integrates. And by the way, you probably already own it. About a year ago, Microsoft announced that Microsoft Teams reached 20 million active users. That was an increase of 13 million from July. There's a walkie-talkie feature announced earlier in 2020 that allows people to use push-to-talk on smartphones and tablets over Wi-Fi or cellular data. The feature was designed for employees who speak, with customers or run day-to-day operations. By the way, we're up to about 100 million users reporting using it daily. And I don't even know if that number is accurate. If you think about it worldwide, we have over 1 million companies worldwide, with over 650,000 companies in the United States alone using the Office suite software, right? The Office suite 0365, Outlook, OneDrive, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, OneNote, SharePoint, and Microsoft Teams, all covered in the E3 license. So you probably actually already own Teams. For our 1 and 2 points, I'm going to introduce our esteemed colleagues, Ryan Williams and Jim Bob Howard. They're going to talk about Teams governance in Yammer. Gentlemen, please take it away.
Thank you, Dean. Hello, everybody. This is Ryan Williams, and I'd like to introduce myself first, partner and associate director here at Netrix. And I am joined here today with Jim Bob Howard, who is the manager of our workplace collaboration team. Like Dean said, we are going to touch on keys 1 and 2, and we're going to get into topics around Teams governance and Yammer.
I'm Jim Bob Howard. I'm the manager for workplace collaboration here at Netrix, and looking forward to bringing some of these things for you.
So let's first define what Teams governance is. So when we start thinking about Teams governance, we get into topics like external or guest access, naming conventions, compliance, expiration policies, security of our data. So when we think about labels on that data or classification for that data and DLP policies for that data as it relates to 365, and Teams is that additional place where we need to take those policies and apply it to. And in addition to that, things like application policies and blocked words, private channels, but then auditing and usage and reporting as other examples. As we've seen, many of our customers early on turned off a lot of different features, like this financial services organization that I'm talking about here, where they needed Teams early on. They deployed it very quickly. They turned a lot of things off to make sure that they felt everything was safe. Now they have everybody using Teams, and the business is starting to evolve, and the organization is now reliant on Teams, the integral part of their day-to-day business. And so their governance has needed to evolve with that. And that's where we come back to things again like guest access. Jim Bob, can you talk to some of those aspects or keys that we're talking about when it comes to guest access or governance?
Absolutely. To Ryan's point, many organizations, because of COVID, had to jump to Teams fairly quickly just to get their workforce remote and be able to make sure that their workforce was safe. Many of those organizations turned off guest access because it was just too big of a hill to climb while you're trying to get all of your workers safe. But one of the things that a lot of companies are doing, especially this financial organization that we talked to, is they are now coming back and saying, you know what, our team is remote, but now they're sharing things externally that don't stay within our organization. So one of the ways that you can avoid some shadow IT is by using Teams as your extranet. Turning guest access back on and giving very specific guest access to specific guests is super important for making sure that your folks aren't sending things through email that they shouldn't be, posting things to Google Drive or to some other cloud platform that is not part of your organization. Keeping things inside Teams and allowing guests to come in and have access to specific things, and then also having the ability to turn that off, really makes it possible that you can now use Teams as your extranet to be able to share that. Something that is important, though, especially if your team has not been used to having guest access, is to make sure that it's really easy and obvious for them to be able to see specifically which teams are allowing guest access. So let's first talk about what it takes to be able to give guest access. There are a lot of places that you can do it. There are a lot of pieces that you need to kind of put together. You can control it at the very top level in Azure Active Directory with your external identities, external collaboration settings, and you can see the URL there. If you log into yours and you have this admin role, you will be able to update this information. So the first thing you want to do to allow guest access is to let admins and users in the guest inviter role to be able to invite people, guests to be able to come into your organization. But you also want to turn on this other one, which is members can invite. It doesn't mean that they can invite just anybody, and you can control domains if you want to. You can whitelist specific domains, you can blacklist other domains, you can say that these are allowed and these are blocked, or you can leave it open, because you're still not going to necessarily give every guest access to everything just because you've turned this on here. This only allows the next thing to go. The next place you need to set things are in Teams guest access. So if you go into org-wide settings, go into guest access within the Teams admin panel, you want to allow guest access in Teams. Once you've done that, now we can start talking about what access they're actually going to have. Microsoft Teams is managed by Microsoft 365 groups. So we also need to make sure that guests can be a part of those groups so they can be a part of the team. When you go into the admin panel, go into settings in Microsoft 365 groups, two settings you want to do is let group owners add people outside your organization to Microsoft 365 groups as guests. And then the second bullet, super important, let guest group members access group content. That means they get to have access, just like any other member of the team, to have access to specific files that are there, participate in the chat, participate in meetings. You can go a bit more granular than that too, by controlling guest access within SharePoint. So SharePoint is where your files are stored for specific teams. This access also controls OneDrive. So if you're having a one-to-one or a one-to-many chat and you're sharing files there, those are going to be shared from OneDrive. If you're sharing files in a specific team, those are going to be in SharePoint. But this SharePoint guest access at the tenant level controls both of those. And you can make one more granular than the other, but the main thing you want to do is you want to set content to be able to be shared with new and existing guests. So an existing guest is someone already has an Azure Active Directory account. They're already set up as a guest in your tenant. New means that your members, because we've just said that before that we're going to allow members to be able to invite people, that makes them a new guest. And they have to authenticate, and it goes through several processes within Azure Active Directory to make sure that they are really who they say they are. And you always have control to go and turn that back off for specific guests if you need to. But this allows your guests to stop using shadow IT, invite the people that they need to be able to participate in the channels, channel conversations, and in the files themselves. And then even down at the very site level, you can say these sites don't allow guests and these sites do allow guests. So if you do want to allow guests, you want to go into the active sites within the SharePoint admin panel and set the content to be shared with new and existing guests. So all of those things need to happen so you have that much granularity over everything when it comes to sharing with guests. Now you may have noticed over on the left-hand side, it looks like we're in Teams here, and this is just an image on the left side of my slide. But notice that there's some differences by the way my teams are designated. So the ones that allow external access, first thing you'll notice is that it actually says EXT on it. So I'm letting the users know that external users may be a part of this. But the other thing that may not be quite as obvious right at first, but then when you look at it, you'll see those icons are actually different too. We're using different iconography for teams that allow external guests. So I definitely recommend having a way to distinguish teams that are internal only from teams that have guest users as well. So in my situation, I just made all of my internals to have just black icons, and then I have red that shows up, so it stands out pretty easy for my users. So when you go to start allowing guest access, especially if you haven't done it before, it's super important to be able to let people know exactly which teams are allowing those guests to be a part of them as well.
Thank you, Jim Bob. So what about when we have non-work related items? Is Teams that platform that you would use for that?
It can be. So there are different times when you want to use Teams versus using Yammer. So within Teams, you have that's where you want to control exactly who has access to a specific group. So here's some great times when you want to use Teams: a project that you're working on, a marketing team, internal collaboration, huddling around a specific initiative. You may want to have separate teams for departments and for committees. When it's important who is in and who is out, that's when you want to use Teams. But another tool that you have at your disposal too is Yammer. A good thing to use for Yammer is for things where you want to give corporate communications, org-wide collateral sharing that you want to share across all of your organization. This is a good place for some non-work topics. Maybe you have a running club. Maybe you have people that like to get together and read books together, people who are interested in volunteerism, or anything that's cross-departmental. So let's say you want to talk across different departments about time management or document management, or even technology tips and tricks. That's another great thing to use Yammer for. The point about Yammer as a good way to use it is when membership is self-selective. So Teams when I want to control who gets to be in, Yammer when I want people to come and go as they please. But here's a good thing to do too, because we are talking about Teams. There's a time when you want to integrate Yammer with Teams. The first one is that you can pin it to the left rail. And now this is a user setting. Every user in Teams can decide whether or not they want to have access to Yammer itself by pinning it to the left-hand rail of their Teams client. And then the other place that you can integrate Yammer is by using a Yammer tab within your channels for quick access to communities and topics. So if you want to set it on the left-hand rail, this is what it's going to look like when you're done. By clicking on the ellipsis, you can go and search for Yammer or search for communities. You'll find it either way. And then you can click that little pin button to make sure that it pins and stays to the left-hand rail. Inside of a team, though, when you come into a team, you'll want to go into a specific channel, and you'll see here that I have the leadership connection tag that's actually being searched here. So this is an example of getting topics into your team's environment. So it's really easy to add one. Again, we're just going to go into a specific channel, click the plus button, come in and search for Yammer or search for communities. You'll find it either way, just like before. And then you'll get this pop-up that says Yammer community or Yammer topic. So by Yammer topic, anytime I use a hashtag, a new topic gets created within Yammer. This allows me to filter by specific things. So if I have a list of wins that are going on within the organization, but I don't want to see necessarily all of them because my team is really specifically looking for mergers, for example, then I can set that topic that way. Another great way to use it is if I have a specific community that is not specifically work related. For example, again, this large financial organization that we worked with, they were creating an initiative to create a community as their employees' children were going back to school in the days of COVID. Some were locked down, some weren't locked down, some were going to class part of the time, some not, others. Everyone needed some sort of way to share resources, and those who had resources be able to share them out. But they also wanted to have some control over that. So anything that the company was doing, they created a team that was communicating that information and kind of collaborating internally. And then when they were ready to post that to the larger organization, all they had to do was come over to their tab where they had actually connected the Yammer community right there, and were able to post there as well.
That's great, Jim Bob. So what I'm hearing is for those non-work related communities at every level, Yammer is probably the better area to go for that, so that people can decide if they want to be part of that community or not. But then also at a greater level, company broadcasts, maybe even external knowledge sharing to my partners that also use Yammer.
Absolutely.
Is it also mobile friendly?
Of course. So it's built into Teams, and as Dean was pointing out, this tool is available in all of your devices, from desktop to tablets to your mobile phones. And so all of the things that you integrate are also going to be pretty much the same experience across all of those devices.
Thank you very much, Jim Bob. Dean, back to you.
So next up, we're going to talk a little bit about user adoption. So as you can tell by the flavor and the pace of this webinar, there's a lot of information we can share, and we're really only scratching the surface. So user adoption is a critical piece, and for that, I'm going to hand off to my colleagues Pam and Tom.
Hello, everybody. I'd like to take a minute here just to talk a little bit about user adoption services and what that entails. User adoption is key number 3 to taking your teams to the next level, although it does apply to almost any technology deployment that you might be thinking about within your organization. As a quick introduction, my name is Pam Hoover. I run our user adoption services practice, and with me today is Tom Craddock.
Hi, everybody. My name's Tom Craddock. I work closely with Pam on the user adoption services side with a focus around delivery of successful training.
Thanks. So when we talk about user adoption services, it seems like the most obvious component to think about, but in reality, it's a common problem with a very significant cost as you think about what is the downside of people not adopting and engaging with technology. You've spent the time, the design, the money, the resources to deploy a new technology. And from a technical perspective, this may have been deployed with 100% success, but oftentimes there is a gap in that bridge between when technology leaves IT and when it hits that end user. And so when we think about user adoption, we think about how are we going to actually translate technology for the end user? How are we going to help them understand what's in it for them? How are they going to use it? Prepare them for the change and help them through the journey, not just on day 0 when technology is deployed and it's available, because no matter how effective or great a technology is, how amazing teams can help pull together collaboration, it really is going to only be as successful as the number of people using it, getting people influenced by their peers to leverage it, providing formal training, providing all of the support resources that are going to help with the engagement and help users understand how their workflow can be benefited through using this platform. So when we talk about user adoption, there's several real components to what that could look like. And we want to talk about awareness. How are we going to drive awareness leading up to that technology deployment, leading up to T0? How are we going to generate desire for change? Because a lot of times these are changing how people are working today. Maybe some factors might be new ways of doing familiar tasks, but oftentimes we're asking users to change how they're doing something today. And as probably you are all most familiar with, change isn't as easy for users as just one day doing something different. So how are you going to generate that desire for wanting to change? How are you going to support that knowledge and be able to support their ability to learn the new technology and then reinforce that change so that you can set these behaviors down the road? So when we think about user adoption, again, there's really a couple of components. There's adoption change management, there is developing the communications, and then developing the education and training. And so, Tom, recently we went through a pretty significant project with one of our clients, and like many of you on this webinar today, have probably expedited the team's deployments in the spring due to COVID. So, Tom, tell us a little bit about what this project entailed from a user adoption perspective, and really how did this help impact the overall success of their deployment?
Sure. As was mentioned a little bit earlier, this was another organization that the pandemic hit and had to kind of adjust from the plan they had in place to expedite that process a little bit. And the good thing about this process that Pam's alluding to that I'll step us through here is having a process in place really helped us adjust on the fly to be able to put a plan in place to roll out teams for this organization and really cater to some of the components that would really be quick wins and things to get the users off the ground. So if we step through that process a little bit, we met with the team early on, and one of the major issues was sprawl. They had teams, they had a plan in place, and they really didn't go through the governance process. So they rolled out teams, and there's a lot of teams. We're starting to get duplicate teams, and people weren't really adopting. So we kind of pressed pause on that and really started to think through with the project team what the long-term vision is, what the criteria for success are, and what are some immediate use cases that we can train and communicate on properly so that people can adopt better and really get this kind of off the ground. So using that as kind of the North Star, we were able to develop use cases and start to formulate a concrete plan for user adoption. So once we understood all of those the vision and the goals and the use cases, we were able to build out that targeted communication plan to help drive that excitement and awareness. When we're looking at communication plans, it's not just talking about the new technology that's coming, but how the users can expect this to impact them, but also the benefits that they can expect from this. So following along the communication plan, we also developed a team's training plan. And with this client in particular, we were able to tailor that training to those use cases and those components they were going to deploy initially up front, so that the users can be ready and well prepared for when this technology hits their desktop or their laptop. They're able to use it and gain efficiencies in their day-to-day behavior. So we took the time with them to really understand what those major use cases are up front and some things we can do to help drive this early adoption.
So Tom, as part of this process, did all of the features and functionalities roll out immediately, or were there any special considerations given the unique environment of COVID and being able to help get 3,000 users engaged quickly?
Yeah, that's a good question, Pam. So not everything was rolled out up front. We really focused on initially getting kind of the initial collaboration pieces in place, the chat, the calls, and the meetings. I remember particularly we had kind of laid out where OneDrive would fit into this and the sync, and the client was a little hesitant to throw too much at the users, which is totally understandable. So we really focused on those quick wins and then started to ease into some of the use case specific trainings or other components that again would help them gain efficiencies. So having that plan in place, we were able to roll out for those first components and then follow a similar process to help continue that sustained adoption as they move farther and farther into teams.
Great, thanks, Tom. I think you hit on a really interesting point, which is the amount of change. And one of the benefits of doing an adoption change management framework and building a team for supporting that change is you can assess the tolerance for change, the appetite for change within the organization, and determine if timelines are overlapping with other business initiatives. Oftentimes in technology, we think, IT might be the only group changing. There might be systems changes on the sales side. There might be other business unit changes that are going to collide or overlap with some of the technology changes. So having an understanding of what level of change is happening across the organization is a really important component of visibility. So that way you can plan either around additional change, something that might be happening on the HR side, or at least be able to join forces and communicate one singular change from a business perspective. And so the last thing we want to leave you with, if you can do one thing leaving this webinar, one thing to level up your teams or any other deployment, it's really going to be to plan. Tom talked a little bit about one of our recent projects, and the reason that we were able to shift gears so quickly to meet the growing demands of COVID and the uniqueness around that was because we had an adoption change management framework in place. We had an understanding of the background, the vision, the goals and objectives, what other change was happening within the organization, and we had that visibility and sightlines into the whole picture. And so because of that, we were able to shift gears quickly rather than go back to the well and start from scratch and start a plan from the beginning. Many organizations skip right to training. Training is a very critical component, of course, to be able to support the understanding of end users, ability to use technology, but that shouldn't be the first part of the conversation. Excuse me. It is important, but developing that adoption change management strategy, developing that awareness and desire pieces are going to be paramount to be able to set this project up for success from an end user perspective. Because again, when we think about the success of a project, of a technical deployment, there's the technical deployment component that is successful, but also making sure that users are engaging and using technology as it's meant to be used. And so again, the last piece here is really focus and don't forget about driving that awareness and desire for change. That is going to be hugely beneficial, leading up 6 to 8 weeks, maybe 3 months, depending on the size and scope of the deployments, and prepare users to what to expect. That's what we think is the one thing that we want you to take away from today and leave and start to apply immediately.
Thank you, Pam and Tom. That's a pretty impressive overview of what user adoption can really do and benefit your organization with. Next up will be Sat and Oliver, and they're going to talk about another part of the journey, which a lot of people have been through parts of or all of, but we felt it was really important for those of you who are considering shifting toward Microsoft Teams, and this is about the meeting and calling. Take it away.
All right, thanks, Dean. My name's Oliver Radcliffe, and I'm joined today with my colleague, Sat Sharma. So we're solution architects here at Netrix who specialize in unified communications and, obviously, especially Microsoft Teams. So today for keys 4 and 5, Teams meetings and Teams calling, we want to discuss a case study of an organization we recently worked with to kind of help them fully utilize Teams for calling and meetings. So we'll talk about where they were, where they started, and what solutions we helped them deploy. So this customer is a manufacturing organization with, like a lot of other organizations, a drive to move to the cloud, and this included communications. So they came to us to see how Teams could help them achieve their calling and meeting goals and requirements. So to begin with, they started out with the legacy on-prem PBX that was a little bit outdated. They had high support costs with it and a lot of administrative overhead. And they had an outage in the last year that had left them without phone service for about a day and a half. Primarily, customer inbound calling was done through a couple of hunt groups that were created per plant, which allowed customers to reach the back office users locally. And this was a pretty easy, basically a one-to-one swap for Teams call queues. They had also implemented a few meeting solutions throughout the last few years without really giving a whole lot of thought to a cohesive strategy. So there was some end user confusion about what to use and when, and then the costs kind of were trending upwards. They also had a third-party webinar platform that did a pretty good job with metrics, but it was expensive. And again, it was just another separate product that required additional end user training, and it added to the IT administrative overhead. So this customer had recently deployed Exchange Online, and they had migrated all of their mailboxes from existing on-prem Exchange and had enabled SharePoint Online and some additional Office 365 functionality. But when they came to us, what they really wanted to know was what Teams could provide for them with minimal additional cost, but also without scrapping their entire telephony investment, because they did have some things that they required to keep or were nice to haves. So they had some analog endpoints that they needed to maintain. Specifically, they had some elevator and emergency phones that dialed certain people within the local office when lifted off hook. And they had overhead paging units in a couple of their offices that their users were used to. They had built some business processes around. They wanted to keep the overhead paging. They also had some legacy fax machines, but they weren't, they wanted to reduce their reliance on them, and they were open to doing something a little bit more modern with that. So with that, I'll hand it over to my colleague Sat Sharma to share some of our solutions for this customer.
Perfect. Thank you, Oliver. So for this particular customer who was in a manufacturing arena, we were able to kind of come in and help the customer to transform their communication and collaboration solution from a couple of different disconnected solutions into a one unified communication solution, which was powered by Microsoft Teams. So the biggest thing we did for this customer is to get rid of their legacy PBX solution, which was their telecom component, and incorporate that capability into Microsoft Teams. And the way we were able to help this customer was by leveraging our direct routing service that we offer to all of our Teams customers. And they already had all the licenses from a Microsoft 365 standpoint. In this particular case, we were talking about thousands of users. So the per user per month type pricing model was not a very cost effective model for this customer. We have what's called a voice session based plan, which is essentially you get a maximum concurrent call path subscription, and then that kind of becomes your PST and calling limit. So no longer you have to get a per user per month type subscription, much more cost effective and pretty easy to scale up and down depending upon the consumption of the service. With direct routing, we were also able to incorporate their existing analog devices and paging solution, which were analog type devices. So the SBC model that we use is able to incorporate with the on-premises gateway that these analog endpoints connect to, and then it connects back to our environment to provide interoperability between Teams users and the analog device. So people could call each other from Teams. They can dial a specific extension numbers and relay a broadcast at one manufacturing plant or warehouse or office location or a campus-wide announcement. So all those functionalities were retained. We also did some device replacement in this transformation. So there were a couple of or a handful of common area phones in the lobby areas or common spaces on the warehouse floor. So we were able to replace those with a Teams native device, which provided a similar look and feel as the Teams desktop client and the mobile application that everybody was converted into. With Teams meetings, we also were able to incorporate the meeting solution that this customer was using a different platform for, as well as the webinar style meetings. We also were able to provide them audio conferencing add-on license through our CSP program. So we were able to kind of assess what licensing they had today and what additional components they needed. All their Teams meetings were enhanced to include a dial-in option so that external attendees could call a phone number and a conference ID to connect to the audio portion of the meeting. This customer was also doing businesses with some international clients. So with having an international dial-in options, those attendees were able to call a phone number that was local to their region to connect to the audio component of the Teams meeting. And they did not have to make an international call, which was kind of a cost saving from the attendee side. Teams room systems were also introduced in this transformation. So they had a handful of conference rooms which had a video solution or video conferencing solutions. We were able to replace them with a Teams MTR devices. so that it's all native to one platform. Again, same look and feel as your desktop client or your mobile application, easy to adapt, and it was seamless for end users. Teams Live event was introduced to replace their webinar. So as you may know already, Teams Live event is already included in part of the base Teams SKU. It can host up to 10,000 or 20,000 attendees, depending upon your licensing model. It's a one-to-many broadcast. This particular event that we are in is also hosted in Teams Live event. In addition to all this transformation of the current services to a newer platform, we were also able to introduce the core features that Microsoft Teams brings to the table, which is a Teams and channel. So we were able to kind of transform their internal communication to a Teams and channel-based interactions where, we were able to create different specific teams for customers, and then each team had a specific department for a special project or, focused conversation, and all the chats were retained and was persistent for people to go back and refer to certain discussions or share files and co-author files and all the collaboration features that Teams brings. The main number of this customer, they had a bunch of IVR hunt group type call distribution method in the legacy PBX. We were able to replicate all those components into a Teams call queues and auto attendant, which was pretty easy to do by a warehouse location or store location. Each location had their own, time zone, different business hours, and then out of business hours was a special call treatment. So we were able to kind of customize it for each location using call queues and auto attendants in Teams. And I think one of the big benefits here was, for us to be able to provide their phone service, their room kits. We have a room kit which is available as subscription to our customers so that they did not have to incur an expensive expenditure to buy all the hardware. We were able to provide all the conference room gear as a service, and which also gives them a support and management of those devices from us. And then we also added an SMS capability in Teams, and this is something which is offered by Netrix here. So we can provide not only the phone service in your Teams environment, but we can also enhance your DID or phone number and provide SMS capabilities that users can use directly from the Teams client. There is an application that you have to add and pin to your Teams application, and then it becomes your SMS repository where you can send and receive SMS and MMS messages. And lastly, the fax solution that this customer had, which was physical fax machines, were transformed into a eFax solution. So no longer those physical fax machines were required, and the POTS line connected to those fax lines were gone. It was replaced by an email-based fax solution. So pretty easy to use the new fax model. Now let's take a look at talk about some of the benefits that we were able to achieve overall with this transformation. First of all, the unified aspect of kind of consolidating all these disconnected solutions. So we were able to condense all these solutions into one platform, which was really easy for users to adapt. They don't have to manage or run different applications to achieve certain things or use different modalities. We were able to meet their business requirements and maintain a lot of those analog and emergency calling type functionality. So it was all the requirements were met for this organization. And the biggest thing is the cost saving too. So we were able to reduce their on-premises footprint pretty drastically. These legacy PBXs were pretty large and they were consuming racks and racks of space in their data center. So all those physical PBX systems were gone. The associated PSD and carrier circuits were also gone, and it was all replaced by a subscription-based model, which was provided by us over the internet using Microsoft Teams. The physical phones footprint was also reduced. So, during this pandemic, a lot of people are working from home. No longer people need a desk phone at their homes. So we took the opportunity here and did an assessment. and provided UC devices to all the users who were working from their homes or anywhere where they can have internet access. And then lower monthly costs. So with the session-based direct routing, we were able to provide a cost-effective method for direct routing in Teams, and they did not have to go with a per user per month scheme, which was going to be pretty expensive for this particular customer. Simplified administrative as well. So users had more control with Teams as their phone platform. Some of the basic things where users have to block a call or a phone number. They had to previously initiate a request and have somebody do it from the back end. But with Teams, users had more controls. They could create their own call groups, set up their delegations, block calls, and all this kind of stuff. So it was, the users were also empowered with more features and functionality with this transformation. And then we also added the managed services for this customer. So not only we did their transformation, we were able to provide a support post-migration so that we are there for the customer in a long term. Any user level issues or administrator level issues, we were able to help the customer based on incident request or through our support desk, which was available 24/7, 365. Then security is the one of the component which is on everybody's mind. So everything we do in Teams, it is backed by the Office 365 enterprise grade compliance and security that Microsoft provides across all their services in 365. So we also have the peace of mind that everything in Teams is secured and following the regulations and compliance guidelines. And lastly, the users were really happy to not use multiple tools, one single unified interface, and user adoption was pretty high in this case as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Oliver so he can discuss a new feature that we all are excited about, as well as this customer.
Sure, thanks, Seth. So to bring it back around and just look a little bit into the future. So one feature that this customer was excited about and we're excited about related to Teams telephony is the collaborative calling feature, which should arrive sometime in March of next year. So with this feature, you'll be able to connect a Teams call queue to a Teams channel. So instead of defining agents and either putting them in an Office 365 group or manually assigning individual agents to a call queue, the agents will be defined by membership within the channel. So when you link a channel to the call queue, the channel will get this calls tab added to it. And then with this feature, we'll have this shared call queue log. So you can kind of see there in the middle. So all of the calls from the queue will be logged into this calls tab of the channel. So agents will be able to see the call history, any missed calls or voicemail. And on the right there, you can see the other agent status, including who's available to take calls, who's currently in a call. And it also has, a very similar look and feel to the calls app. So it'll be easy to acclimate to. And then one bonus with this is while the call is going, right? So it's connected to a channel. You'll still be able to go into the posts tab and use that as a collaborative persistent chat space. So think of a scenario where a customer has a specific question. The agent will be able to work in real time with the team with that persistent chat history to identify the solution. And then this chat thread can then be searched later by another agent if a similar issue comes up. So with this, we'll also have some additional reporting functionality and some queue modification delegation to reduce the overall load on IT staff. So just a couple reasons why we're excited for this feature. And it will help, I think, bridging between basic call queue and auto attendant functionality to some kind of quasi contact center functionality. So with that, thank you for your time, and back to you, Dean.
Thanks, Seth and Oliver, for covering off on really meetings and calling, and it's a continually evolving platform. It's a continually growing platform. And Don Kennedy and myself are going to talk a little bit about Power Apps and bots. And it's another part of the platform that's converging with Teams, and it's backing Teams, and it's a really important aspect of this whole thing. And with that, I'm just going to hand it off to you, Don.
Perfect. Thanks, Dean. So as everybody heard earlier in the session today, millions of customers are using Teams on a daily basis. And what a lot of our customers and companies are trying to do is think of, what's next? How do we integrate teams more into our business and really start, solving some of those business problems or enhancing productivity? So a lot of that's done through Power Apps and bots, which I think is, one of the most exciting aspects of the keys to success for teams. So I'm going to go over, kind of what Power Apps and bots are at a high level and, how it's impacting our customers. And then Dean's going to go a little bit more in depth, and we'll kind of round it out with some exciting examples of what we're seeing within different organizations. So, what are Power Apps at a high level? The definition is it's a suite of services, connectors, and a data platform that provides rapid application development environments to build custom apps and really address some of those business problems. Some examples of that are Power Automate, Power BI, bots, et cetera, et cetera. As I mentioned, Dean's going to go into a little bit more depth. But, just wanted to baseline what that Power Apps suite is. Additionally, what are bots? They're a app that's developed that allows end users to conversationally interact with AI, and it provides the potential to really reduce some of the workflows and create a better end user experience. So what does it mean for a lot of our customers? It means that they're now able to create the ability for end user self-service. They're able to visualize a lot of their data and business metrics, KPIs, et cetera, into a single pane of glass. They're able to enhance and really drive some of that end user productivity by, cutting out those extra steps. And, lastly, it provides the ability to tie, a lot of different applications and workflows into that single application interface. Now, Dean's going to go into a little bit more depth. Dean?
I really want to just lay into the basics, though, of what Power Apps are. It's a platform that Microsoft has created through the combination of a number of capabilities. They've taken a lot of the capabilities and combined them, and they've made them available within Microsoft Teams. So going back to that single pane of glass concept, what if I can do my business functions and collaborate and meet and talk and find information and interact with a variety of different systems all through that single pane of glass across multiple devices? What if I can take people who don't have a degree in computer science and turn them into developers of business functions and capabilities, right? That's the citizen developer concept of, I just need to teach you some skills on how to use this Power Platform, how to operate within this Power Platform, and lo and behold, you're going to go create new capabilities very quickly for your entire organization. You're going to use the pieces of it, which many are familiar with Power BI, some are familiar with Power Apps, some have started to look at Power Automate and created forms and certain capabilities within that. But really, I get the most excited about that last one, the Power Virtual Agents. I get the most excited about that because I think about how I want to talk to my phone, how I want to talk to Alexa or Google or whatever home automation you have. That Power Virtual Agent is what creates that chatbot front end and that whole new experience. And this is a very brief overview, as you know, where you have limited time. It's a lot to cover in an hour. There's a lot of information that's already been covered, but I'm going to move forward now and ask Don to talk a little bit about what are our customers talking about with bots? What are they asking about?
So I'm going to go over quickly just two examples that are pretty impactful with a lot of our customers and, kind of what's on the forefront of conversations specifically around some of the bots. So, as people have rolled out Teams and are leveraging that platform for a lot of their collaboration benefits, chat's become more and more important with the end user community. And the end users are, continually chatting and, pinging different departments, different groups around, different questions that they might have and things of that nature. So, the FAQ bot is something that tends to kind of come up a lot within the customers. So, I'll walk through two different examples of where customers are using FAQ bots to really enhance either the end user process or create a better experience and take some of the weight off of some of these different departments that might now be in this new COVID world being hammered with questions on a continual basis. So, the first example is HR. So we've got a customer that, looked at this and we had the discussions about bots where HR was continually getting hammered with, what's our COVID policy? What's our vacation policy? When are company holidays? What are we doing for, remote work? Is our office open today, et cetera, et cetera. And what was happening, there was a lot of chatter within that organization, and they were, the HR department was continually getting hammered with a lot of this information that was already out on their internal intranet. So instead of users going out and scouring, trying to figure out when, benefits enrollment was or things of that nature, we worked with them to create this FAQ bot that the end users could chat with that bot and ask those questions that were, frequently asked, and would be, provided that automated response. Additionally, the bot was able to, take questions that might not have been answered before and, route those to someone that could answer that question for that end user. So, we were able to create this better end user experience and reduce some of the overhead of that HR department and, allow them to focus in on their work, but also allow quick responses to the end user so there wasn't a lot of this chatter going back and forth. Another really interesting example was we looked at bots to enhance adoption for a new application that was being rolled out to a customer. So as part of this rollout of this new business critical application, there was a lot of adoption services with Pam's group, who you heard from earlier, as well as questions being asked in the trainings and the adoptions, et cetera, et cetera. So through that, we built, and through that training, we built those frequently asked questions, and then we turned those into a bot. So as new hires come on, as they roll it out to a new office, that frequently asked questions bot is available as part of those adoption services and that rollout to continually drive some of that adoption, so that people don't feel like they went through the training and then if they forget it in a month, they don't know what to do. They have that AI to interact with to provide a lot of those answers.
That's a fantastic overview, and I just want to highlight that the possibilities are just amazing, right? The ability to take that interface, that common digital assistant that we're getting so used to in multiple parts of our lives, it's just outstanding. So run with it, let your imagination go with it, and think about changing the interaction, the experience people have. And next up is a great colleague of ours. All of the people on this call are subject matter experts and could talk for days on these topics. But next up is Rich Lilly, who's going to get to cover security in a very short period of time.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Rich Lilly. I'm a partner and associate director running our cloud infrastructure and security team. As Dean said, while we are extremely short on time, I don't want you to be short-sighted in your security approach for teams in your enterprise. I want to cover off on just a couple of foundational items to kind of get us started, and certainly happy to discuss further for folks that aren't as comfortable in some of these areas. But really, for anything Teams related, not only Teams, but also Office 365, identity is absolutely key number one. We want to make sure that we're protecting our users' identity with whatever tooling we have. At bare minimum, make sure you're logging those events. Make sure you're protecting with multi-factor authentication. Everything that you store within Teams is backended by a service such as SharePoint, such as your OneNote, or even Exchange in some scenarios. The first thing you always have to think about, especially if you're coming in from not ever having leveraged Teams before, is really you have to start with that concept of identity. One of the key areas in order to protect identity in the Microsoft realm is called conditional access. And this goes way beyond what I would call most folks being comfortable with traditional multi-factor authentication, a phone call, a text, a push notification. Really, when we talk conditional access, we want to have a teeter-totter of productivity and security. We want to have a good productivity experience. We want to have a good measure of security. Anytime that teeter-totter gets on one side, we either suffer from poor user experience or we give the users too much rein, and ultimately security is extremely lacking. In the conditional access realm, we can do things like evaluate a device as a part of access. So we can start to limit access in Teams to a browser if, say, you're not on a corporate asset. Or we can minimize the ability of being able to copy and paste content if you're on a BYO device. I don't have a lot of time to talk through this today, but at a high level, there's a fantastic checklist from Microsoft that goes through how to secure guest access. If you are, as many have talked about prior to the session, looking at introducing guests into your environment, please go out and check that list. It's out there in the Microsoft doc site. Just look for Teams guest access checklist. Again, just highlighting a couple of quick things is deploy multi-factor authentication even for guests. They're likely accessing content that you're sharing internally as well. And look at limiting access to things such as just the web browser. The other thing that was mentioned briefly in one of the earlier sessions was around data loss prevention. So you can actually leverage capabilities in Office 365 to help look for sensitive content being shared within Teams. Another kind of unknown or little known fact is being able to leverage tools like Azure Sentinel from a visualization perspective and also taking out potentially threatened events in Teams. We've actually worked diligently to build out some great visualizations like you see here about what happens in Teams and looking for scenarios like anomalous domains that have never accessed the environment, users being made owners of multiple teams, suspicious file extensions. The telemetry is all there. What you do with it is really key. And a lot of organizations don't really use that to help protect them more from a security perspective. A very quick example here is that we are currently working with a global professional services firm. They had a really specific need around being able to provide Teams to any user anywhere on any device, as well as be able to move towards providing guest access. So leveraging conditional access and a handful of other controls like Microsoft Cloud App Security, we're able to deliver them peace of mind when it comes to leveraging Teams for both their internal parties as well as externally. Again, I know I had a very short amount of time, but there's so much more you can be doing to securing Teams in your environment. Again, I recognize that a lot of folks probably jumped right into Teams with COVID without thinking about kind of the impact of some of the pieces we've talked about today. So please take the opportunity to go back and review your security posture.
Thank you, Rich. Jay, can you wrap us up?
I can. Thank you, everyone. So you heard all the art of the possible that can be achieved with Microsoft Teams. So what's the next steps? Netrix is a national go-to partner with Microsoft when it comes to the M365 platform, which includes Microsoft Teams. We have fixed fee workshop offerings around calling, meetings, and platform. Netrix can help deliver user adoption services, Teams governance, app in a day, as well as helping you get to a Teams pilot and then on to deployment. For more information, contact your Netrix representative or call or email us at the contact information shown here. You will receive a follow-up in the next couple of days as well from our team. Now to wrap up, back to Dean.
I want to thank everybody for attending and hopefully being able to drink from the fire hose as we managed to cover a whole lot of different topics at a very high level for the last hour. I want to thank you also, my colleagues, for bringing their subject matter expertise and their attention to this. And I want to wish everybody health and happiness and great prosperity as we wrap up a difficult year and head into a new year.